We need to write Chapter 1 of 12 for Episode 26. The context: Lieutenant Chen accepts a mission to keep survivors alive. Captain Vance plans feint on K-Ale and Supply Depot. Boards Indomitable where Sister Captain Vance reveals 36-hour countersent Reich. Fleet prepares. Vance commands diversion. So Chapter 1 should start the episode, likely focusing on the immediate aftermath or the beginning of the operation. We need macro to micro scale, no CL-ICI acutes, crisp military dialogue, high stakes, 800-100 words, output-only story. Let's begin. Set the scene on the Indomitable bridge, time ticking. Show the tension between Vance and his sister, or maybe start with Chen on the ground. But context says Vance commands diversion force, so Chapter 1 could open with Vance on the bridge of his ship, maybe a cruiser, as the fleet moves out. Use specific details, ship names, alien technology, human tactics. Avoid CL-ICI acutes like the fate of humanity rests. Use realistic dialogue, orders, status reports. I'll write from Vance's perspective as he leads the diversion force, with Chen's mission mentioned as parallel. Keep it gripping. The bridge of the ASF Vindicator hummed with a low, constant thrum, the sound of a warship at full combat readiness. Captain Marcus Vance stood at the center of the CIC, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the tactical holotank. The Kalen Supply Depot at Sigma 7 was a glowing red icon, ringed by defensive platforms and 2 destroyer-class hulls. His diversion force, 3 frigates, a light cruiser, and the Vindicator herself. Not enough to win a stand-up fight, enough to make them look elsewhere. All ships, tight in formation. I want a staggered delta. Comms broadcast the decoy transponder codes on all Kalen frequencies. Let them hear the Indomitable's signature. Vance's voice carried no edge, flat, professional. The crew moved without hesitation. His XO, Commander Reyes, stepped close. Sir, the Indomitable just went dark. Captain Vance is running silent toward the logistics nexus. We're on the clock, 36 hours, that was the window. His sister had laid it out in the war room, a single, precise strike at the enemy's forward fuel and ammunition caches. Without resupply, the Kalen fleet would be crippled for weeks. But to get there, they needed the enemy's eyes fixed on a threat they couldn't ignore. Vance tapped the holotank. Bring us to bearing 270, flank speed. I want a direct intercept course with that depot. Reyes blinked. Sir, that's a suicide run. They'll see us coming from 10 light seconds out. That's the point. Vance turned to face the bridge crew. We are not here to fight. We are here to be seen, to be tracked, to be the problem they cannot look away from. Every second they spend calculating our vector is a second they aren't scanning the dark space behind them. A young ensign at the sensor station raised a hand. Contact, Kalen Pickett ship, bearing 040. They've lit us up with targeting radar. Good. Vance allowed himself a thin smile. Let them get a good look, then we start jamming. Random patterns, make them work for the lock. The Vindicator shuddered as her engines pushed to maximum output. Around her, the smaller frigates matched the acceleration, their hulls glowing faintly with expended heat. The void outside was black and empty, but Vance knew the Kalen were there, patient, arrogant, confident in their technological edge. They had never faced a human commander who treated his own ship as bait. Sir, incoming transmission from the depot. Standard Kalen challenge code. The comm officer looked up. They're ordering us to halt and identify. Reply with the Indomitable's ID tag, then cut the channel. Don't answer any follow-ups. Vance walked to the command chair but did not sit. He stood behind it, fingers drumming once on the backrest. Raise status on the missile batteries. Full load, point defense rounds cycled. Spinal railgun charged to 60%. We can fire in 10 seconds if needed. We won't need to, not yet. Vance glanced at the countdown timer on his personal display. 34 hours, 47 minutes remaining. The Kalen will want to capture, not destroy. They'll try to disable us, board us, learn our fleet's intentions. That hesitation is our armor. A low alert tone sounded. The sensor officer reported 2 Kalen destroyers breaking orbit from the depot. They're moving to intercept. ETA 8 minutes. Perfect. Vance straightened. All hands brace for evasive maneuvers. Reyes, I want a continuous burn toward the depot's outer marker. If they think we're trying to ram their supply lines, they'll commit everything to stop us. And if they actually catch us, Vance looked at the holotank, at the red icons closing in. Then we make sure they remember what it costs to kill a human ship. But we don't die today. We run, we juke, we waste their time. That's the mission. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All vessels, this is Captain Vance. We are the decoy. We are the noise. Every missile they fire at us is a missile not aimed at the Indomitable. Every second they chase us is a second closer to their defeat. Stay sharp, stay alive. Execute. The bridge fell into a rhythm of crisp reports and quiet commands. The enemy destroyers grew larger on the tactical display. Vance's hands remained still. Inside, the tension was a cold wire, but he had learned long ago that fear was a fuel. Burn it too fast and you ran empty. He would burn it slow. Somewhere behind the Kalen lines, his sister was sliding through the dark with a fleet killer at her command. He just had to keep the wolves looking the other way. The first enemy missile salvo launched. Vance gave the order to scatter. The dance had begun. The dance had begun. 24 Kalen missiles, ion trails confirmed, Sensor Petty Officer Javi Rourke called out, his knuckles white around his console edge as the red blip streaked toward them on the tactical holotank. Split 12 per destroyer, impact ETA 90 seconds. No ECM lock, they're using dumbfire guidance for the first salvo. Point defense, activate, scatter the remaining decoy drones. Vance's voice was flat, no tremor, as 8 small craft pulsed off the Rattler's port wing, emitting false heat signatures to draw the incoming fire. 6 of the incoming missiles veered hard for the drones, detonating in silent bursts of orange plasma 300 meters out. The other 6 held their lock. Laser batteries stitched the dark between the ships, 4 of the remaining missiles blowing apart mid-flight. The 5th slammed into the port sensor array, sending a shower of sparks across the bridge and a jolt through the deck plates. Rourke cursed under his breath, tapping furiously at his console. Sensor reroute complete, no loss of tracking. Minor hull damage, no breach. The 2 Kalen destroyers, their iridescent purple hulls glinting in the distant starfield, held their bows pointed directly at the Rattler. No evasive maneuvers, no spread formation. They were so confident in their speed and firepower they didn't bother with basic formation doctrine. A harsh, accented voice crackled over the open comms, sneering, "Human vessel, this is Commander Vorek of the Vorek's Wrath. Surrender now and we will grant you a quick death. Resist and we will strip your hull for scrap and feed your crew to the void." Vance didn't even blink. "Copy that, Vorek. Save the speech for your war council. We'll send you a transcript when we're done here. All hands, hard port roll, 45 degrees, thrust 120%. The Rattler banked so hard the inertial dampeners whined, crew members grunting as their harnesses bit into their shoulders. The 2 red destroyer icons on the holotank skewed, forced to adjust their intercept vector to match the human ship's new course. Intercept ETA adjusted to 5 minutes, Rourke called. "They're pushing their engines harder, no regard for fuel reserves." A tight beam ping, encrypted to only Vance's comms, buzzed in his earpiece. He didn't react outwardly, just tapped his temple twice to acknowledge the message. Alara's voice, staticky but clear, came through the private channel, choke point clear. 11 minutes to firing solution. Keep their attention, brother. Copy, Vance murmured, too low for anyone but his comms to pick up. The next salvo was larger, 16 heavy warheads trailing brighter purple ion trails. Vance ordered SID, the ship's AI, to dive for the debris field orbiting the depot's outer marker. Twisted durasteel hull fragments, frozen coolant bladders, the scattered wreckage of 3 human frigates and 2 Kalen corvettes lost in the opening skirmish. The Rattler wove between 2 half-destroyed frigate hulls, the missiles forced to adjust their trajectories to avoid the debris. 8 of them slammed into the wreckage, detonating in showers of molten metal and ice. The other 8 held their lock. Point defense lasers took out 7, but the 8th locked onto the starboard engine nacelle. A decoy drone slammed into it 10 meters from the hull, detonating in a flash of white light that sent shrapnel pinging off the Rattler's armor. Damage control reported a 3-centimeter dent in the nacelle casing, no loss of thrust. Type IV plasma torpedo launched from Vorek's Wrath, Rourke yelled, his voice tight. Range 200 clicks, impact ETA 45 seconds. Full burn, straight ahead, Vance ordered. The Rattler's engines flared bright blue, the ship lurching forward so fast the bridge crew's head snapped back. The torpedo detonated 15 meters off the stern, the shockwave rattling every bulkhead and sending a console sparking into silence. A crewman cut off a yelp as Reyes, the XO, shot him a sharp look. Vance's eyes were fixed on the tactical holotank. The indomitable Alara's command was now 1.5 clicks off the Kalen supply convoy's port flank, shields raised, railguns charged, completely undetected. The 2 Kalen destroyers were 2 minutes out, every sensor and weapon system locked on the Rattler, their picket ships all turned toward the decoy, no one watching the convoy that was supposed to be their priority. Vance smirked, quiet so only Reyes could hear. They took the bait. The wolves are exactly where we want them. Word count, 972, Chapter 3, Shadows of Steel. Humanity's last stand against the alien Armada ASF. The Kalen destroyers advanced in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the arrogance of an empire that had never known defeat. Their sensor arrays swept wide arcs, hunting for the Rattler's signature, blind to the trap unfolding around them. On the Rattler's bridge, Captain Vance leaned forward, eyes locked on the tactical holotank. The convoy's supply freighters drifted in neat columns, unaware of the predators closing in. Beyond them, the Indomitable crouched like a predator in tall grass, railguns primed, shields humming at low power to mask their presence. Kalen destroyers closing, range 1 click, Reyes reported, her voice steady, clipped. They're ignoring the convoy, all fire control locked on us. Vance's lips twitched into a smile. Good, let them. The Rattler's hull shuddered as another plasma torpedo detonated nearby, its shockwave rippling across the armor plating. Sparks cascaded from a fried console, but the crew barely flinched. They had rehearsed this dance 100 times. "Status on Indomitable," Vance asked. Reyes checked her console. "Ilara's holding position, railguns hot." "She's waiting for your mark," Vance nodded once, "then let's bleed them." The Kalan destroyers opened fire, their beam cannons slicing through the void in brilliant arcs of violet. The Rattler's shields flared, absorbing the first salvo, but the impact rattled every bulkhead. "Shields at 78%, Rourke called out. "We can take 2 more volleys before bleed-through." "Make it count," Vance said. The Kalan commander's voice crackled across the comms, dripping with disdain. "Human vessel, your resistance is futile. Stand down and surrender your convoy. You are outmatched." Vance's reply was calm, surgical. "You're looking at the wrong prey." At that moment, the Indomitable unleashed hell. 4 railgun slugs tore through the void, each the size of a shuttle, accelerated to near-relativistic speeds. They slammed into the lead Kalan destroyer's flank, ripping through its shields like paper. The ship's hull buckled, venting atmosphere and fire in a geyser of molten debris. "Direct hits," Reyes barked. "Target 1 crippled, life support failing, weapons offline." The second destroyer wheeled in panic, sensors scrambling to locate the hidden attacker. Too late. The Indomitable's second salvo punched through its reactor housing, igniting a chain reaction that split the vessel in half. The convoy's freighters erupted in cheers over comms, their relief palpable, but Vance's expression remained cold. "Not yet. Kalan reinforcements will be inbound. We hold until the convoy clears the kill zone." The Rattler's tactical display lit up with new contacts, Kalan picket ships breaking formation, turning back toward the convoy. Their arrogance had cost them, but now they understood the trap. "Multiple bogies inbound," Rourke warned. "Frigates, gunships, and 1 heavy cruiser." "ETA 3 minutes, Reyes' jaw tightened. "That cruiser will shred us if it gets within range." Vance's voice was steel. "Then we don't let it." He keyed the comm to Ilara. "Indomitable, shift position. Prioritize the cruiser, we'll keep the frigates busy." Ilara's reply was cool, confident. "Copy, wolves to the throat." The Rattler surged forward, engines burning bright, cutting across the convoy's flank. Point-of-fence lasers spat fire, shredding incoming missile swarms. Railguns thundered, tearing into Kalan frigates that scrambled to intercept. "Frigate 3 disabled," Reyes reported. "Frigate 4 maneuvering evasive." The cruiser loomed larger on the holotank, its hull bristling with weapons, shields glowing like a miniature star. The Indomitable broke cover, railguns roaring, slamming into the cruiser's shield bubble. The impact rippled across its defenses, but the barrier held. "Cruiser shields at 60%, Ilara transmitted. "We'll crack them, but it'll take time." Time they didn't have. The Kalan frigate swarmed the Rattler, beam cannons lancing across its hull. Shields flared, alarms blared, consoles sparked. "Shields down to 42%, Rourke shouted. "We can't hold this pressure." Vance's voice cut through the chaos. "Deploy the drones, full spread." A dozen decoy drones launched from the Rattler's bays, scattering across the battle space. Each emitted false signatures, mimicking the Rattler's profile. Kalan frigates diverted fire, chasing ghosts. "Window open," Reyes said. "We've got breathing room." Vance seized it. "Target frigate 4. Railguns fire, the Rattler's guns roared, slugs tearing through the frigate's hull. The vessel split apart, fragments spinning into the void, but the cruiser was closing, its weapons charging. "Indomitable status," Vance demanded. Ilara's voice came sharp. "Shields at 20%, 1 more salvo." The Indomitable's railguns fired in unison, slugs hammering into the cruiser's shield bubble. The barrier collapsed in a flare of energy. The next volley ripped into its hull, detonating its reactor. The cruiser exploded in a blinding flash, shockwaves rippling across the battle space. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of comms. Reyes exhaled, tension bleeding from her shoulders. "Cruiser destroyed, convoy clear of engagement zone." Vance leaned back, eyes hard. "Good, but this was just the vanguard. The Armada will know we're here now." The holotank flickered, displaying new contacts at extreme range, dozens of Kalan warships, their formation precise, their intent unmistakable. Reyes whispered, almost to herself, "That's not a fleet, that's an empire." Vance's gaze never wavered. "Then humanity will show them what empires fear." The Rattler's engines burned, the Indomitable regrouped, and the convoy slipped into the shadows of steel. The war had only just begun. Word count, 986 Chapter 4. The calculus of survival, the holotank painted death across the void. 37 Kalan warships, arranged in a delta formation that spoke of centuries of naval doctrine. Not a hunting pack, a hammer. Vance studied the tactical feed, fingers drumming against the armrest. "They're not accelerating." "Why would they?" Reyes pulled up drive signatures. "They know we're trapped. The convoy's max burn is 0.3 C. They can match that without straining their reactors. Then they're hurting us." Lieutenant Chen's voice carried the edge of realization. "Look at the flanks, 2 groups breaking off. They're boxing us in." Vance saw it now. The Kalen commander wasn't rushing. He was methodically sealing escape routes, compressing the battlefield into a kill box. Textbook encirclement executed with the patience of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Indomitable, feed me your sensor data. Vance pulled up Alara's tactical overlay. Her ship had better resolution at this range. Transmitting now. Alara's voice carried static, the distance between them straining comms. I'm counting 12 heavy cruisers, 15 frigates, 10 corvettes. They've got a carrier at the rear, see the emissions spike. Vance magnified the contact. The carrier was massive, easily 3 times the Indomitable's length. Its hull bristled with launch bays, fighter swarms already spilling into formation. They're not here to capture the convoy, Reyes said quietly. They're here to annihilate it. Then we don't give them the courtesy of a fair fight. Vance switched to the convoy channel. All civilian vessels execute emergency burn toward waypoint Gamma. Do not deviate. Do not stop for rescue. Your only job is to survive. The freighter's drives flared, their civilian reactors pushing beyond safe tolerances. They'd burn out in hours, but hours was all Vance needed. Reyes, plot me a course through the debris field. The frigate wreckage from the initial engagement. That'll put us inside their weapons envelope for at least 90 seconds. 90 seconds of hell beats certain death. Vance turned to Chen. Load missile bays with decoys. I want every Kalen sensor operator thinking they're facing a full battle group. Chen's fingers flew across the console. Decoys armed. Launch sequence initiated. Wait for my mark. Vance watched the enemy formation adjust, their delta splitting into 2 prongs. They were committing to the encirclement, leaving their center vulnerable. Indomitable, can you punch through their screen? Alara paused. 1 pass, maybe 2. But we'll lose shields, that's all I need. Vance keyed the Rattler's intercom. All hands brace for maximum acceleration, we're going hunting. The Rattler's engines screamed, thrust pressing Vance into his seat. The ship lurched forward, cutting through the debris field with reckless precision. Wreckage glanced off the hull, each impact a hammer blow against the armor. Enemy cruisers tracking us, Reyes reported. They're adjusting fire solution. Decoys away. Vance triggered the launch. 40 missiles streaked from the Rattler's bays, each one broadcasting a warship's electronic signature. The Kalen sensors went haywire, their targeting systems struggling to distinguish real from fake. The enemy formation wavered. Cruisers broke formation to engage the decoys, their discipline cracking under the information overload. Now indomitable, full burn. Alara's ship surged forward, railguns firing in sustained bursts. The rounds tore through the Kalen screen, punching holes in their defensive line. One cruiser's reactor went critical, the explosion blinding sensors across the battle space. Vance didn't wait. Reyes, bring us around, target the carrier. That's suicide. It's a statement. Vance's voice carried no room for debate. We kill their command ship, they lose coordination. The convoy gets clear. The Rattler banked hard, its maneuvering thrusters firing in desperate bursts. The carrier loomed in the viewport, its launch bays disgorging fighters in a frantic defense. Missile lock, Chen said. They're painting us. Ignore it. Keep the course. Vance watched the range counter drop. Railguns fire at will. The Rattler's main guns roared, each round a thunderclap against the carrier's shields. The barrier flickered, held, then collapsed under the sustained assault. The next volley struck the hull, carving trenches through the armor. The carrier's return fire came in a wall of plasma. The Rattler's shields flared, warning screaming across every console. Shields at 15%, Reyes shouted. We can't take another hit. One more salvo. Vance's hands gripped the armrest. Give me one more. The railgun cycled, fired, and the carrier's bridge erupted in a fireball of decompressed atmosphere. The ship went dark, its drives cutting out as it drifted into a dead trajectory. Break off, full evasive. Vance felt the Rattler shudder as plasma rounds clipped the stern. Damage reports flooded in, hull breaches, casualties, systems failing, but the carrier was dead, and without its command, the Kalen formation dissolved into chaos. Convoy is clear, Reyes said, breath ragged. They're through the waypoint. Vance allowed himself a single exhale. Then we've bought them time. The holotank flickered, new contacts appearing at the system's edge, more Kalen ships, reinforcements. The war had just found its rhythm. Shadows of Steel, humanity's last stand against the alien Armada. ASF Episode 26, Chapter 5. The Rattler's hull still groaned from the carrier's death throes when the next wave appeared. The holotank filled with crimson markers, Kalen reinforcements, sleek destroyers and heavy cruisers sliding into formation with predatory precision. Their drives burned like knives across the void, cutting straight toward the battered human frigate. Contacts, 12 capital ships, 30 escorts, Reyes reported, voice clipped, professional despite the sweat streaking her temple. ETA to weapons range, 90 seconds. Captain Vance didn't flinch. His eyes tracked the incoming formation, calculating angles, probabilities, and the thin margin of survival. They're not regrouping, they're hunting. Chen, vector us toward the debris field. Use the carrier's wreckage as cover. Chen's hands flew across the console. Course laid in, it'll be tight. Everything's tight, Vance said. Execute, the Rattler lurched, thrusters firing in sharp bursts. The ruined Kalen carrier loomed ahead, its torn hull venting atmosphere in glittering streams. The frigate slid into the shadow of the wreck, sensors dimming as the debris cloud swallowed them. Radiation spike, Reyes warned. Carrier's reactor is unstable. If it goes, we're in the blast radius. Better a chance than none, Vance replied. Weapons status, railguns cycling, missile racks at 40%. Plasma batteries offline, Chen said. We're fighting with half a blade. Half a blade can still cut, Vance muttered. The Kalen formation adjusted, their lead cruiser broadcasting a pulse across the void. Signal was arrogant, a declaration of dominance. The humans didn't respond, silence was their weapon. Enemy destroyers splitting off, Reyes said. They're sweeping the wreckage, they'll find us. Vance leaned forward. Not if we strike first. Chen, lock railguns on the lead destroyer, wait for my mark. The Rattler's crew held their breath as the Kalen ships closed in. The alien hulls gleamed with cruel artistry, their weapons arrays glowing faintly. The destroyer nosed into the debris field, sensors probing. It was confident, careless. Mark, Vance said. The railguns thundered. Slugs ripped through the void, smashing into the destroyer's flank. Shields flared, collapsed, and the rounds punched deep into the reactor housing. The ship erupted in a blossom of fire, fragments scattering across the wreckage. Target destroyed, Chen confirmed. The Kalen formation reacted instantly. Cruisers swung their batteries, plasma lances cutting through the debris. The Rattler jolted as a near miss scorched the hull. Shields at 10%, Reyes shouted. We can't take sustained fire. We won't, Vance said. Chen, fire missiles, scatter pattern. Make them chase ghosts. Missiles streaked out, weaving through the wreckage. Some detonated against debris, others slammed into Kalen escorts. The formation faltered, momentarily blinded by the chaos. Convoy reports they're clear of the system, Reyes said. Relief flickered in her tone. Waypoint secure. That's our job done, Vance said. Now we survive. The Kalen cruisers regrouped, their arrogance tempered by the sudden loss. They advanced cautiously, weapons hot. The Rattler system screamed warnings, hull integrity failing, power reserves dwindling. Captain, Chen said quietly, we can't win this fight. Vance's gaze hardened. We don't need to win, we need to bleed them. He opened the command channel. All hands, brace for close action. We're going to cut through their line. The crew responded with grim silence. No speeches, no bravado, just the calm acceptance of soldiers who knew the odds. The Rattler surged forward, drives burning at maximum. The frigate burst from the wreckage, railguns firing in rapid succession. Slugs tore into a Kalen cruiser, shredding its weapons arrays. Plasma fire answered, ripping across the Rattler's hull. Metal screamed, compartments vented, alarms blared. Hull breach on decks 3 and 5, Reyes shouted. Casualties reported. Seal them off, Vance ordered. Keep us fighting, the frigate knifed through the formation, missiles detonating in brutal arcs. Kalen escorts exploded, their arrogance shattered by the ferocity of human resistance. The Rattler bled, but it struck like a predator cornered. Enemy cruiser disabled, Chen reported. 2 escorts destroyed. The holotank flickered, Kalen markers thinning, but more ships loomed at the edge of the system, reinforcements sliding into the kill zone. They'll overwhelm us, Reyes said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the truth. Vance didn't look away from the holotank. Then we make them pay for every meter of space. Humanity doesn't bow, not today. The Rattler turned, battered but unbroken, railguns cycling for another salvo. The void burned with fire and steel, the clash of empires echoing across the stars. And in that crucible the humans held their ground, calm, relentless, terrifying in their refusal to die. The war had found its rhythm, and the rhythm was blood. The Kalen reinforcement wave crested the system's edge 87 seconds after the last railgun salvo silenced the disabled cruiser, 12 destroyers and 2 battleships sliding into the kill zone at 12,000 clicks per hour, their plasma batteries glowing hot enough to strip a planet's crust. The civilian convoy hiding in the shadow of the adjacent asteroid belt was the only thing keeping Vance from ordering the Rattler to burn hard for the jump point, and the Kalen had already spotted the faint heat signatures of the unarmed transports. Boarding craft launch detected, Chen said, voice flat as he tapped his tactical console. 8 dart-shaped vessels peeled off the lead destroyer's flank, heading straight for the Rattler's port side, where the earlier plasma strike had melted through 30% of the outer hull plating. ETA to hull contact, 4 minutes, no surrender hails, they're not here to take prisoners. Reyes's fingers flew across her damage control console, pulling up casualty counts as bulkhead alarms chirped in the background. Sealed off decks 3 and 5 as ordered. 17 dead, 32 injured, 3 critical but stable in the infirmary. Non-essential systems offline, 62% power to weapons and shields, 28% to life support. Reroute all auxiliary power to point defense arrays and port bulkhead reinforcements on decks 2 through 6, Vance said, not taking his eyes off the holotank where the Kalen battleships aligned their main cannons. Chen, hold fire on the boarding craft until they cross the 500 click mark. Don't waste rounds on targets we can pick off at close range. The Rattler turned hard to port, presenting its undamaged starboard side to the incoming Kalen destroyers to draw their fire. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, slamming into the forward shields and sending a jolt through the deck plates. Sparks showered from overhead conduits above the navigation station, and Ensign Leela Marquez's hand twitched on her control yoke before she stilled it, jaw tight. Senior Chief Petty Officer Jax Rourke didn't look up from the power grid display, but he tapped her shoulder once, quick and quiet, before returning to his work. Lead boarding craft at 520 clicks, Chen called. Firing solution locked. Fire. The forward railguns barked, two 200-kilogram tungsten slugs, tearing across the distance at 0.2 light speed. The lead boarding craft disintegrated in a flash of superheated metal, the second spinning out of control before slamming into the Rattler's port hull 3 decks above the marine staging area. The impact sent a shockwave through the ship, alarms blaring as Bulkhead 4 port blew out, venting atmosphere into the void. Bulkhead 4 sealed, Reyes said immediately, voice unchanged as she pulled up the casualty feed. 2 dead, 5 injured, all accounted for. Remaining boarding craft adjusting course, targeting the breach. Marine Squad Leader Mendez report. Vance keyed his comms. Rattler actual, this is Mendez. The corporal's voice came back crisp and steady, the faint crackle of rail rifles charging in the background. Squads in position on deck 4, EMP grenades prepped, ready to fry their suits the second they cut through. No chatter, no games, copy that. Hold fire until they're fully inside, don't give them cover to plant charges on the hull. The Kalen battleships fired a minute later, 6 plasma bolts slamming into the Rattler's shields. The holotank flickered as the shields dropped to 41%, the ship lurching hard to starboard as Vance fought to keep her on course. The Rattler's railguns returned fire, a slug punching through the lead destroyer's command deck, sending it spinning out of formation, thrusters misfiring. Enemy destroyer disabled, Chen reported. 2 more closing to 10,000 clicks, boarding craft at 200 clicks, preparing to disengage docking clamps. Vance watched the Kalen markers on the holotank, the glow of their plasma batteries bright enough to outshine the distant stars. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a speech, just keyed the shipwide comms, tone as calm as if he was ordering a routine systems check. All hands brace for boarding, keep firing, every meter they take costs them. Dismissed. Below decks, Corporal Mendez tightened his grip on his rail rifle, the metal of the barrel warm against his palm. The hull behind his squad glowed cherry red as the Kalen boarder's plasma torch cut through, the smell of melted polymer drifting into the staging area. He nodded at Private Sanchez, who raised his EMP grenade, thumb hovering over the arming switch. The torch cut through the final layer of hull, and the first Kalen boarder stepped through, blue plasma rifle raised. Mendez fired first, the tungsten slug punching through the boarder's visor before the alien could pull the trigger. The battle for the Rattler had just moved inside. The 2 remaining Kalen destroyers slewed to port, their plasma batteries flooding the void with cerulean light as they bracketed the Rattler's crippled stern. A 12-gauge plasma salvo slammed into the ship's starboard cargo bay, blowing a secondary hole in the armor and sending a shower of molten titanium spiraling into the black. On the bridge, Vance didn't flinch as the deck lurched again, his eyes fixed on the holotank where the destroyer's markers glowed hot enough to burn through the display's filter. Railgun 3 charged, Chen reported, voice flat over the hum of failing life support systems. Firing solution locked on Destroyer 2's power core. Fire. The rail slug punched through the destroyer's forward shield, sheared through its armor like wet paper and detonated inside the reactor compartment. The ship listed hard to starboard, its plasma batteries guttering out as emergency power failed. The second destroyer broke off its approach, swerving to avoid the expanding debris field from its sister ship, but not before it launched a final wave of boarding craft. Auto turrets engage hostiles, Vance ordered, tapping his comms panel. Target only the boarding craft, conserve ammo for the destroyer if it re-engages. Below decks, the staging area reeked of melted polymer and superheated copper. Corporal Mendez pressed his back against a stack of crated railgun slugs, the metal warm against his fatigues, and watched the breach in the port hull. The cherry-red glow of the Kalen plasma torch had cut through 3 layers of composite armor, and the first wave of boarders had poured through less than 30 seconds prior. Private Sanchez was knelt beside him, an EMP grenade clamped between his knees, thumb hovering over the arming switch. 3 Kalen soldiers poured through the breach next, their blue plasma rifles spitting bolts that chewed chunks out of the bulkhead inches from Mendez's head. He fired twice, tungsten slugs punching through the visors of 2 boarders before they could adjust their aim. The third dropped to one knee, tossing a plasma grenade over the crate Mendez was using for cover. Grenade, Mendez yelled, shoving Sanchez toward the far wall. The EMP grenade clattered across the deck, detonating right at the breach. The Kalen's energy shields flickered and died, their plasma rifles sparking as the electromagnetic pulse fried their power cells. Mendez popped up, firing 2 controlled shots that took out the kneeling boarder before he could reach for the knife strapped to his thigh. A 4th boarder barreled through the breach, armor scarred from the EMP blast, swinging a serrated combat knife. Private Reyes stepped around the corner of the corridor, pump-action shotgun raised, and put a spread of tungsten pellets into the boarder's chest at 10 meters. It crumpled to the deck, blue blood leaking from the gaps in its armor. "Ammo count," Mendez barked, popping a fresh magazine into his rail rifle. 12 rounds, Sanchez said, checking his sidearm. Reyes has 2 shells left, Torres is topping off the LMG. The corridor beyond the breach lit up with Kalen's suppressive fire, plasma bolts stitching the ceiling. Torres' light machine gun chattered, laying down a wall of tungsten that forced the boarders back. Over the squad comms, Chen's voice crackled through. Auto turrets have taken out 2 of the 3 boarding craft. 3rd is attempting to dock at the secondary airlock. Vance says hold the breach, no boarders get past the staging area. Mendez nodded, even though no one could see him. He peeked around the crate, firing 2 quick shots that took out a Kalen sniper perched on the wreckage of the hull breach. The ship lurched again, and he heard the distant crump of another impact somewhere aft. The Rattler's shields were holding for now, but every minute the Kalen spent pouring boarders into the hull was a minute closer to the ship being overwhelmed. Sanchez rigged the crate with a proximity charge, Mendez said, pointing to the stack of railgun slugs beside him. If they push past us, blow the whole stack, take the corridor with them. On it. Outside the viewport set into the corridor wall, the distant glint of the Kalen Armada stretched across the stars, thousands of ships hanging in the dark like a noose. The Rattler's railguns fired again, a slug punching through the second destroyer's remaining functional shield. The fight wasn't over, but for Mendez and his squad, the only thing that mattered was the 10 meters of corridor between them and the enemy, and the order to hold it at all costs. Sanchez's fingers flew over the proximity charge detonator, the faint blue pulse of the explosive core casting sharp shadows across the stack of railgun slugs. He slapped the cold plastic of the detonator into Mendez's free hand, jaw tight. Set. 10-meter kill radius, enough high explosive to turn a platoon of those Kalen bastards into scrap metal before they crossed the crate line. Plasma fire erupted from the main breach first, bolts slamming into the reinforced cargo crates 2 meters from Mendez's position. The smell of ozone and melted polymer thickened the filtered air. Torres didn't flinch, her light machine gun chattering, tungsten AP rounds stitching the breach opening. 2 Kalen boarders in light combat armor crumpled, their plasma rifles clattering to the deck plating. The comms crackled, Vance's voice tight, static cutting in over the din of fire. Secondary airlocks compromised. Boarders are in the mess deck, moving for the staging area access. Rios, Hale move to intercept. Mendez, hold the main breach, no hostiles get past your line. Mendez nodded even though no one could see him, jerking his chin at Rios and Hale. They didn't waste time, grabbing compact carbines and breaching charges, sprinting down the side corridor leading to the mess access. The ship lurched again, hard enough that Mendez slammed his shoulder into the crate, the distant crump of another impact echoing through the hull. Outside the reinforced viewport set into the corridor wall, the Kalen flagship's plasma lance flared, slamming into the Rattler's port shield. The shield flared so bright it bled through the viewport glass, casting everything in harsh orange light. For half a second, the stars outside vanished, replaced by the glint of 1,000 Kalen destroyers and cruisers hanging in the dark, their plasma batteries lighting up the void like a swarm of angry fireflies. Back at the main breach, the Kalen shifted tactics, rolling fizzing plasma grenades down the corridor. Mendez yelled grenade. And the squad dove behind the reinforced crates, the explosion rocking the passage, hot air washing over them, the edge of Mendez's helmet melting slightly from the heat. When the smoke cleared, 3 Kalen in heavy assault armor were advancing, plasma repeaters raised, bolts slamming into the crates and blowing chunks of composite material loose. Torres switched to sustained fire, her LMG's barrel glowing red, tungsten rounds punching through the Kalen's personal energy shields. One of the assault troopers took a round to the neck plate and crumpled. The other 2 took cover behind a stack of supply pallets, laying down suppressive fire to pin the squad in place. The comms crackled again, Rios' voice tight, the comms crackled again, Rios' voice tight, static cutting in as another impact rocked the Rattler's stern. Rattler actual port shield is gone. Bulkhead 7 breach is widening, Kalen boarding craft will punch through in 90 seconds. You're on your own for the next 2 minutes, copy. Mendez snarled a copy, slamming a fresh mag into his carbine and checking the charge on his sidearm. Tor's LMG barrel glowed bright enough to cast long, wavering orange shadows across the corridor, tungsten rounds stitching across the supply pallets the Kalen were behind. Their personal energy shields flickered under the sustained fire, but the aliens didn't retreat, their plasma repeaters spitting bolts that blew chunks of composite off the crates shielding the squad. "Switch to he," Mendez yelled over the din. "Save the last three for the boarding craft, keep their heads down." "Last three, Roger," Torres grunted, twisting the selector on her weapon but not slowing her fire. A low groan came from the blown-out access panel 10 meters behind their position. Mendez snapped his head up, spotting the third Kalen trooper, the one knocked prone by the earlier grenade, fumbling to recharge his Reaper plasma rifle, his assault armor scorched black across the chest plate. "Flank left," he barked. Corporal Diaz was already turning, his standard-issue battle rifle barking. A plasma bolt singed the edge of his visor and he hissed, but didn't break aim, putting 2 rounds through the Kalen's shoulder joint. The alien howled, dropping the Reaper and collapsing against the corridor wall, his shield sputtering out. The 2 remaining Kalen behind the pallets seized the opening, advancing with their repeaters raised, shields flaring as they took Tor's fire. One peeled off, priming a plasma grenade over his shoulder. "Grenade," Mendez yelled, and the squad dove behind the remains of their crate cover. The explosion blew the front panel off the crate, shrapnel slicing through Tor's left sleeve, and she grunted, swearing under her breath as blood seeped through the tear in her combat suit. Mendez yanked 2 satchel charges from the webbing on his pack, the ones he'd stowed before the Kalen first breached. He slapped magnetic detonators onto each, yelling at Diaz to give him 10 seconds of covering fire. Diaz laid down a burst so heavy his rifle barrel began to smoke, plasma bolts cracking over his head as he held the trigger. Mendez popped up from cover, sprinting across the corridor, a bolt slamming into his right boot and searing through the armor into his calf. He stumbled but kept his feet, jamming the first charge behind the base of the pallet stack, and the second onto the overhead conduit running directly above the Kalen position. He twisted both timers to 3 seconds and dove back behind cover just as Torres cut off her fire. The charges blew in sequence. The pallets disintegrated in a fireball of composite and volatile supply stock, the overhead conduit collapsing onto the 2 Kalen troopers, their armor melting under the combined blast. Both went down screaming, their shields fully depleted. The corridor went silent for half a second, save for the distant crump of another impact and the hum of failing overhead lights. Rios' voice crackled back, sharper now, no static. "Shield generator is back online, port shield at 40%, but we've got 12 Kalen boarding craft locking onto the hangar bay. Engineering says the forward mag doors are jammed. You're the closest squad. Get to hangar 2, seal the internal blast doors before they breach." "Go, go, go." Mendez yanked the shard of shrapnel out of his calf, ignoring the warm blood soaking through his combat suit, and yelled to his squad to move out. Torres slung her smoking LMG over her shoulder, grabbing a fresh mag from the crate as she stood, while Diaz took point, his rifle trained on the breached bulkhead where more Kalen could pour through at any second. They sprinted down the corridor, the ship lurching again as the Kalen flagship fired another plasma lance. This time the new shield held, the bright orange flare washing over the hull instead of burning through, painting the corridor in harsh flickering light. Mendez glanced over his shoulder at the smoldering Kalen bodies, then forward to the reinforced blast doors at the end of the corridor leading to Hangar 2, the red emergency exit sign stenciled above them blinking steadily. He keyed his comm, his voice calm even as his leg throbbed. "Rattler actual, Mendez here. We're moving to Hangar 2. ETA 2 mics, tell engineering to get those mag doors open if we need to vent the bay." "Copy that, Sergeant," Rios replied, and for the first time there was a hint of relief in his tone. "Don't let those bugs get a single boot on our deck." The ship lurched again as another plasma lance streaked across the void, the new port shield flaring bright orange before absorbing the impact, painting the corridor in harsh, flickering crimson light. The smell of burnt Kalen chitin and sharp ozone hung thick in the air, mixing with the coppery tang of Mendez's own blood seeping through his combat suit. Diaz Point snapped his rifle up, sighting the overhead vent grating 10 meters ahead. "Contact high crawl spaceport side." The grating blew outward with a screech of torn metal, 3 Kalen warriors skittering down the wall on their 6-clawed limbs, mandibles clicking as they raised plasma pistols. Torres dropped to one knee, her LMG roaring as she hosed the corridor, 5.56 rounds punching through chitin and sending black ichor spraying across the bulkhead. One Kalen got a shot off, plasma searing the edge of Diaz's shoulder pauldron. He grunted but didn't flinch, putting 2 rounds straight through its head before it could fire again. Mendez keyed his comm, his voice steady even as his calf throbbed in time with the ship's impacts. "Rattler actual, Mendez here. Hostiles in the corridor, 50 meters from Hangar 2 blast doors. Bulkhead ahead is already being cut, ETA 90 seconds to full breach." Rios's voice crackled back, tight with stress. Engineering is rerouting all non-essential power to blow the jammed mag doors. Port shield drops to 15% the second they do it. You got 60 seconds before those bugs pour through the bulkhead. Mendez nodded to Torres, not taking his eyes off the breached bulkhead ahead. Suppressing fire on the cut, keep them pinned. Dias with me starboard maintenance hatch. Will cut through to the hangar 2 access corridor, seal the inner blast doors from the other side. They kicked the rusted maintenance hatch open, sliding into the cramped crawl space, the metal grating biting into Mendez's wounded calf, blood seeping faster now, but he kept his rifle raised. Behind them, Tor's LMG roared, the sound of Kalen's shrieks echoing through the corridor. The crawl space sloped down toward the hangar access, the whine of the Kalen plasma cutter growing louder through the bulkhead with every meter they moved. They popped out into the narrow access corridor right behind the sealed hangar 2 blast doors. The control panel next to the doors sparked, wires hanging loose. Kalen infiltrators had already tried to hack the lock open. Mendez jammed his override key into the manual release slot, yanking the lever as hard as he could. It stuck. Diaz slammed the butt of his rifle into the lever twice, and it clicked, the blast doors rumbling to life, hydraulic hiss filling the small space. A Kalen warrior lunged through the narrowing gap before the doors fully closed, its plasma cutter raised to slash at Mendez's chest. He twisted out of the way, the cutter searing the edge of his armor and singeing the skin underneath. He drove his combat knife up under the Kalen's chin, twisted, and kicked the body back through the gap. The blast doors slammed shut with a final heavy thud, the Kalen's plasma cutter clattering to the deck on the far side. Mendez keyed his comm, voice steady despite the pain lancing up his leg and chest. Rattler actual, hangar 2 inner blast doors sealed. 14 hostiles trapped in the access corridor, no way into the hangar. Rios's voice came back bright with unbridled relief. Copy that, Sergeant. Engineering just blew the mag doors, vented all 12 boarding craft and the trapped hostiles into space. Port shield is holding at 17%. Viper Squadron is clear of the launch tubes now, heading for the Kalen flagship's aft shield generator. You were right, their boarding run was a distraction to cover their shield recharge cycle. Mendez leaned against the cold blast door, watching through the small viewport as sleek black Vipers streaked past the viewport, plasma cannons charged, heading for the Kalen flagship's glowing aft section. The Kalen had thought their overwhelming, arrogant assault would break the human crew in minutes, that their unrelenting barrage would leave no time for a counterstrike. They'd forgotten humans didn't break when hit, they hit back harder. Torres popped into the access corridor a second later, slapping a field med patch on Mendez's bleeding calf, a smirk tugging at her mouth. Told you that shrapnel was gonna need more than a quick yank. Next time let the corpsman handle it. Mendez huffed a laugh, wincing as the patch numbed the pain in his leg. Next time you can take point through the crawl space. Let's get to the hangar, help the Viper crews load ordnance. We've got a flagship to take down. The metallic thrum of Rattler's failing power core vibrated through the deck plates under Mendez's boots as he limped toward hangar 2, Torres half a step behind to catch him if he faltered. The air smelled of burnt wiring, ionized air from the plasma impacts hammering the hull, and the sharp, acrid tang of the field med patch still fizzing on his calf. Distant crumps echoed through the ship's ribs every time a Kalen plasma round found its mark, each one making the bulkheads shudder just enough to stir the grit caked in the seams of the floor. You gonna make it, old man, Torres teased, nodding at the blood seeping through the edge of the med patch on his calf. Mendez huffed a laugh, wincing as the deck shifted under him. Shut up, I could outrun you with a bullet in my leg. Next time you're taking point through the crawl space with the shrapnel. The hangar was a controlled frenzy, lit by the strobe of welding arcs and the flashing red of damage control beacons. Rio stood on the gantry above the Viper racks, yelling over the din as ordnance techs locked the last of the anti-shield torpedoes into the fighters' underbellies. A squad of Marines in full combat armor patrolled the blast door perimeter, rifles raised, eyes darting at every creak of the hull. Sergeant. Rios nodded at Mendez as he hauled himself up the gantry stairs, voice tight but steady. Engineering just confirmed the power reroute to the Viper jammers is live. Point defense on the Kalen flagship's flank is down 38%. Rook's flight has a clear shot at the aft emitter if they move now. Before Mendez could respond, Rattler lurched hard to port. Sparks rained from the overhead conduit runs as a direct impact sheared a section of the outer hull, and a tech half his age went flying off a Viper maintenance ladder. Torres moved fast, snagging the kid by the back of his flak jacket before he hit the deck, yanking him upright. Eyes on your station, kid, she snapped, shoving him back toward the fighter he'd been working on. The kid paled but nodded, grabbing his torque wrench and ducking back under the Viper's wing. Mendez braced himself against the gantry rail, watching through the hangar's reinforced viewport as the human fleet traded plasma fire with the Kalen Armada. The alien ships had broken formation slightly, their arrogant initial assault leaving gaps in their defensive screen no one had bothered to fill. Viper flight was already a speck on the tactical display Rios had propped on the gantry edge, streaking toward the Kalen flagship's glowing aft section, where the shield emitter cycled with a faint blue pulse. Rattler actual Viper laid, the comms crackled, Rook's voice tight but calm. We're 20 clicks out, their point defense is tracking but jammers are holding. Shield recharge is at 71%, we've got a 90-second window before it's back to full strength. Copy, Rook, Rios barked back. Hold for my mark, don't waste those torpedoes on the hull, put them right up the emitter's exhaust port. Engineering says one direct hit will take the whole aft shield grid offline. The seconds ticked by, slow and thick. Another hit jolted Rattler, this one to the starboard bow, and the hangar lights flickered out for 3 long seconds before the emergency backups kicked in, painting everything in harsh red. Mendez could hear the distant shout of damage control teams reporting a hull breach in Deck 7, sealed but venting atmosphere. Rook go, Rios yelled into the comms the second the engineering team pinged the all-clear on the power reroute. On the tactical display, the 6 Viper specs split, diving low under the Kalen flagship's defensive fire. 2 of them took hits, spinning off in trails of burning debris, but the remaining 4 held their course. Mendez held his breath as the tiny dots reached the flagship's stern, and 4 bright flashes burst from their underbellies. The torpedoes slammed into the blue glowing emitter, and a ball of white light erupted from the flagship's aft, the glow fading as the shield grid shorted out completely. A ragged cheer went up from the hangar crew, but it died before it could build momentum. Rios' comms crackled again, his voice sharp with alarm. All hands brace for impact. Kalen destroyer bearing 032 breaking away from the main line. They're dumping all power to their ramming spikes. They're on an intercept course for Rattler, ETA 45 seconds. Mendez turned back to the viewport just in time to see the sleek, angular Kalen destroyer peel off from the Armada, its bow glinting with the sharp, deadly edge of the ram designed to punch through human capital ship hulls. It was already accelerating, too close to dodge. The impact klaxon screamed so loud it rattled Mendez's teeth, overriding the crackle of damage control reports still bleeding over the comms. The hull groaned, a low, grinding thrum that vibrated through the soles of his boots as the Kalen Armada's secondary batteries hammered Rattler's already weakened forward shields. Point defense is down, main guns are 12 seconds from charge, Rios barked, his knuckles white as he slammed his palm against the tactical console, the display flashing red with the destroyer's closing range. Ramming spike is fully charged, ETA 38 seconds. We can't dodge, not with our thrusters still rerouting power from the torpedo run. Mendez's eyes flicked to the 4 Vipers idling 10 meters away, fuel lines still hooked to their bellies, plasma cannons charged from the last sortie. Launch them, no torpedoes, cannons only. Aim for the coupling between the ram spike and the destroyer's bow. If we shear that off, the spike won't punch through the core. The port launch tubes are shot, Deck 7 breach fried the guidance systems. Rios shot back, but his gaze was already darting to the hangar's aft tube, the only one still functional. We've got one good tube, one pass, that's it. The destroyer dumped all aux power to the spike, its point defense is spooling back up, ETA to full operational is 20 seconds. Then we launch now. Mendez was already moving, yanking the cockpit of the lead Viper open, the metal cold under his gloves. He keyed his comms, the channel crackling to life with the other 3 pilots, all former test jocks who'd begged to be assigned to the Rattler's strike wing. Listen up, one pass, high angle, aim for the coupling. Do not engage the point defense unless you've got a clear shot. We take out that spike or we all die in the next 2 minutes. Rattler lurched to port as Rios burned the main thrusters hard, the hull screaming as Kalen fire slashed across the exposed starboard side. Sparks rained down the hangar bay, lighting up the red emergency strobes in flashing bursts. Mendez felt the G-force push him back into the pilot's seat as the Viper's own thrusters fired, the craft rocketing down the single functional launch tube, so fast his vision blurred for half a second. The destroyer filled his viewport 10 seconds later, its sleek angular bow glinting, the ram spike a foot-wide tungsten carbide rod tipped with a fusion charge bright enough to sear his retina even through the polarized canopy. He could see the Kalen Bridge crew through their unshielded transparent viewport, their scaled faces twisted in smug grins, already celebrating the kill. One of them raised a clawed hand in a mock salute as Mendez lined up his crosshairs on the thin, glowing coupling holding the spike in place. Plasma fire streaked past his canopy, the destroyer's point defense turrets spooling to life. The Viper to his left took a direct hit, exploding in a burst of orange flame that slammed into the destroyer's port side, taking out 2 of the 3 remaining turrets. Mendez held his breath, squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt slammed into the coupling with a bright white flash. The ram spike sheared off with a deafening screech of twisting metal, spinning off into space to slam into the Kalan Armada's second line, punching clean through a frigate's bridge and detonating its reactor in a secondary explosion that lit up the edge of the battle zone. The destroyer's bow slammed into Rattler's port hangar bay a second later, the impact throwing Mendez's Viper sideways, the hull tearing open with a roar of venting atmosphere. But without the ram spike, it was only a glancing blow, the destroyer's hull crumpling against Rattler's reinforced armor before it drifted off, dead in space, its power core destroyed by the stray plasma fire from the downed Viper. The klaxon slowed to a dull wail as damage control teams poured into the breached hangar, sealing the hull tier with quick-setting polymer. Rios' voice came over the comms, rough with relief. All hands, the destroyer is disabled. Kalan main line is pulling back, they're reformulating outside of weapons range. We hold. Mendez climbed out of the Viper, his hands steady, the smell of burnt ozone and vented atmosphere thick in the air. He looked out the viewport at the retreating Kalan ships, the burning frigate, the dented hull of the Rattler still flying. The rest of the human fleet was holding formation, their own hulls scarred but intact. Rios clapped him on the shoulder, a rare, sharp grin on his face. Good flying. Mendez didn't smile. He watched the Kalan flagship, its shield grid still sparking, drift back toward the main Armada. They'll be back. They don't retreat unless they're planning something worse. The words hung in the air as the emergency lights flickered once, then held steady. Somewhere on Deck 7, a damage control team shouted that the hull breach was sealed. The war wasn't over, but they'd survived this round. Word count, 972.